with executive producer once again for the second conversation about the Ted Lasso show. Bill, thank you for doing this, and congratulations on all the success that your team is having.
Oh, thanks so much. It's fun to talk about the show, man. I appreciate it.
Well, so here's the question I want to ask you. When did you know that you guys were onto something special? You know, it wasn't just going to be a show with good people with a good theme, but people are going to really respond to it and even get some award nominations along the way.
Look, it sounds, I'm sure, holier than thou or whatever. Is this? I don't think. I think we were surprised by it by anybody else, and I think that we're very lucky in that a lot of the men and women working on this show behind and in front of the camera know that if you're doing stuff like this, chasing something like that, it never works out. And everybody's stories of, when you're lucky enough to be involved in something that kind of catches a toehold or makes an impression, it's always a surprise. So I would say I'm still surprised and grateful every day that people dig the show, and hope it keeps going. But if it doesn't, that's the natural progression of stuff like this, and it's just the game. I'm grateful to do it.
Yeah. So Bill, as you know, I spend my life talking with leaders about leadership stuff, and Ted Lasso has now become a meme for the kind of leader we would all like to be in many ways. So what I just find remarkable is that season 2, which about Ted Lasso, is really about everybody else besides Ted Lasso. It's really about more than just Ted. But was that an intentional choice, and what about?
I think that's a tribute to one of my many partners in crime, Jason Sudeikis, who is both a head writer and lead actor of a show that he could demand that every episode circled around him if he wanted to. But that kind of spread the wealth, and that we're stronger as a team than we are as individuals kind of mentality, it really bleeds through him. And I think I think it was a great choice on his part too, to kind of service these other characters in ways that as they become richer, people are even more invested in the lives of what you would maybe call secondary characters in a normal TV show.
Yeah. And one of the parts that you mentioned last time we were talking about the fact that you guys spent a lot of time early in the process thinking about the backstory of all these people, some backstories that only now we're beginning to hear little pieces of. I think one of the most significant parts is how important the backstory of each person is, even to the present conflict they're in. I think about Ted's desire to bring Jamie, for example. That seems like a very significant empathic move on all of you to pay attention.
Well, Todd, now I'm talking to you like somebody that's a viewer, and even more than just a normal interview. Yeah, I hope people are checking that out. What's really interesting is we're in a culture right now of immediate gratification, not delayed gratification. And I think a lot of the people that came to this show the first year, and we're lucky they did, were able to, once it had aired, go, I'm going to watch all 10 episodes in 3 days, and I'm going to take it in as one story. And so what's interesting to watch as an outsider is sometimes, as people have to take it in week to week, wanting to see what happens next, wanting to know, that the stories they want to be told are going to be told, and that's why I like your question so much, because not only really in the backstories and in people's history, we feel like we've laid down a roadmap over the first 2 years for what this show is about. And look, I always say spoiler alert in case there's people that like the show, and want to be surprised, and I'll still try to keep it very general. But for instance, as you gradually realize the element of fathers and sons in this show, and that you hear about Ted dropping little tidbits about his own dad, if not Jamie Tart dropping tidbits about his dad, if not Hannah Waddingham, Rebecca dropping tidbits about her father. If you pay attention to that stuff, I don't think you necessarily need to keep notes while you watch it, but I think it hopefully makes the story a lot richer. And look, I'll tell you, I'm bemused because, social media is both fun and rewarding and toxic and horrible. But what I'm always amazed about is, yeah, there's some people that maybe not be focusing, and why should they focusing on that minutia that you're talking about of people's backstories. But there's some people that have put all that stuff together and actually figured out what happens this year. And it's horrifying to me. I can't ever point you towards them uh,
Yeah.
directly, but they've actually taken the time to go, this coup makes me think this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is what this character's deal is, and this is why Ted is this way. And I'm like, oh no, I hope no one reads this. You know, uh,
Well, well, it's so interesting because from my point of view, what I pay attention to is the culture, the culture of the locker room, the place, the entire experience. The most interesting symbols is, from the very beginning where, Ted sits down in the stands and the color of the seats change. Like there's a symbolic piece about when I think about leadership, that's think about the most important thing you can influence by your action and your is calling people together to create a much better culture. And I know that was one of the pieces that you worked on as the executive producer with Jason and others about the culture in the writing room and in the
yeah, it's metaphorical too. I mean, it's cool you point out the credits, and it's apropos because I can't take credit for the credits, but the Jason and Joe Kelly, one of the other creators, and Brendan Hunt and I, one of the things that I really like about those credits, if you get into the metaphor of it, it's how you can culturally change the people around you with your own behavior and not by necessarily telling them what to do. And I really like that where Ted sits, that the colors change, and the B side of that I always want to make sure that we message to people and is I think it's great that the narrative of the show is, hey, it's like a hug for your heart, but I'm always intrigued because you can never control other people's perceptions in that just because that's a great outlook for how to change culture, and how to by actions rather than scolding or admonishing or telling people to behave some way, they might look at their own behavior a little differently. It's still also, interesting to all of us that people see this as such a because we see these as regular folks dealing with the problems we all deal with. It's Ted Lasso's wife and he are splitting up. He's away from his son. He's coaching a team that he's still not winning. He's afraid of sitting down with a therapist, and is skeptical of that kind of outlook. And yet we go, oh, we still like his attitude as he kind of plows through the morass that we all do. And Roy Kent is an aging guy that's had one thing in his life that he was passionate about his whole life. And when it's taken away, were it not for the other partner he found in his life, he'd probably be lost and floundering, but it still was until recently, trying to figure out where he wanted to be and what he wants to do. And we have a woman of means, but certainly emotionally, who had been flat out abused and mistreated, who is now kind of trying to gather herself and forge a path for happiness ahead. So what's interesting to me is, and maybe it's a good thing for us all to think about, none of these people are living charmed lives, you know what I mean? And yet we see it all as positivity just because of the way that they're approaching.
Yeah. So you mentioned, at least where we are when we're recording this, we're still the place where they're not exactly a winning team, AFC Richmond, and there's kind of a remarkable sense that there's a bigger thing than wins and losses happening in people's lives. Okay, but you're leading a winning team. So what's it like to be like leading a team that, at least in your own field and your own work, is succeeding? What are the dangers of success that you try to pay attention to, even at this stage of the game?
I think that the main one, and I always want to take the time, and I think it's one of the, if we're talking about leadership too, I always have to say right now is the time where if I say, were I to claim I was the sole leader on this show, that in itself would be disingenuous and counter, to everything that we're, kind of trying to do. One of the, and one of my biggest advice in terms of leadership is the empowerment of others and leaning on partners. I used to struggle with the job of creating and running TV shows when I was younger, because I had, I certainly felt that I was kind and open to the people that worked with and for me, but I tried to have my hand in every pie. You know what I mean? I would be looking at wardrobe and then looking at set design, and one of the biggest lessons for me back then was learning to hire talented people that you like to work with and empower them to do their thing. And you will get to the same end place if you start with them and say, this is what I want it to be, and then just micromanage them the whole way, which was mistakes that I made when I was younger. And I find that I end up in the same place if I say, you're very talented. We'll talk at the beginning so you can ask me about my mindset. You go do what you think is right for this show, and then I'll come in and meet that with a positive reinforcement, for the stuff I like, and candidness, but not judgment on the stuff that doesn't work for me. And we'll end up with the same place. But at the end of the day, I'll actually get to see my children and have a life and spend all my time really focusing on the things that are the most important to me and give me the most joy. So that's a long way of saying that there's other leaders on this show. And that's part of the, I think that's part of the success formula for me. As far as the dangers of success, in any walk of life, but certainly in entertainment, if you get caught up in trying to please everyone, or to react to what people want more of or want less of, I think it's a slippery slope. I think it's very akin to something in entertainment that I don't love, which is when people chase commerce. When you say, hey, this is working, so we'll do our version of this. I think one of the gifts of Ted Lasso, of this particular show, was that we started on a network that didn't exist and plotted the 3 seasons out even before the show ever went on, and wrote the second season even before the first season was on television. And that gift for us is, as a bunch of writers and creators, going, hey, we at least did 2/3 of this story in the vacuum that we talked about the story we wanted to tell, without all the outside noise getting in and affecting us. So I think that's the danger, is the old adage, if you believe in success, if you want to believe all the people that say you're amazing, you got to believe all the people that say you're cruddy. You know what I mean? And so I think the dangers of success for me, the main one, is you put together a group of people, you all connected and are going at something together. And to me, that unit needs to stay in control of your path, and it's very easy in success to let outside forces push you a new direction, whether it's chasing commerce, chasing something people like, getting away from something that makes people uncomfortable. And those paths always end in a bad place. For me, and television's a great metaphor for it. I used to tell young writers that when you go pitch a show, you're always going to have this moment of truth, Todd, that you'll go and you say, hey, I want to do a show about a young couple in their 20s, an authentic new marriage of people that got married too young, and what it means and how weird it is, because it's really just like dating someone, but then you live together. And it's going to be an authentic young marriage story. And when you come out, people will be like, oh, did you sell it? And yeah. I mean, look, they have a wisecracking kid now, and they may have superpowers, but I think it's like the same show, and that's because you so badly want it to work, and so badly want to get to do it, and so badly want to please the powers that be, that you can end up with a vision that's not yours. And if that vision that's not yours fails, nobody's going to come and tell you, hey, that's not your fault, that's ours. We push you to do that, So that's my biggest warning with success, is it comes harder and harder to go, I want to succeed or fail with what we all wanted to do, not with what the masses or what anybody else wanted to push us towards.
Bill, thank you. That's really great. I appreciate your time and appreciate you doing this.